Good evening, folks. Your eyes do not deceive you. This is a two-man team here at the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast. We're going to talk about AEW Grand Slam, the impending AEW TV deal, which I feel like we talk about every week here on the show. And UFC had something at the Sphere, which was more, I guess, show than fight. We'll talk about that more next on the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast.
Big Gold Belt, Big Gold Belt, Big Gold Belt, Big Gold Belt, Big Gold Belt. All I really want is that Big Gold Belt, Big Gold Belt, Big Gold Belt, Big Gold Belt, Big Gold Belt. All I really need that Big Gold Belt.
How's it going, everybody, on X and on YouTube? It is I, Damian G, joined by the Giant Crab Jamal for another episode of the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast. Crab, how we doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
You know, UFC's weird. We'll get into it, but wrestling in general has always been weird. But it's a lot of business talk. So to let people know, if you don't want to listen to business talk here on the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast, we don't typically get into it. But it'll be a fun show. People got stuff to do. People are busy. So fun show, but we have fun here. You know, for those who have been around long enough, they know what that joke means. But let's start here, Crab, because AEW Grand Slam, typically at Arthur Ashe, you know, my hometown of New York City, Queens, New York to be specific, they are going to be having Grand Slam again this year, but we talked about this on the show, that it seems that the build for Grand Slam was slightly disappointing, or at least, the very least, when we talked about the talent roster being top-heavy. Looking at the card so far, it's got your favorite wrestler, Jon Moxley, going up against Darby Allin in the main event, supposedly. And the rest of it is pretty cut paint by numbers, which even I said last week on this show, AEW's cards for their pay-per-views have been kind of meh. There's no MJF schedule. That might change. Obviously, you know, kids, cards subject to change and all that. But as of right now, the only match that really intrigues me on this card is Bryan Danielson versus Nigel McGuinness, because McGuinness, you know, even though he appeared recently on AEW in-ring and AEW television or pay-per-view, against Bryan Danielson in a throwback to ROH, does that excite you? Does anything about Grand Slam excite you? Because now we'll have Mariah May versus Yuka Sakazaki, Claudio and Yuta versus TBA. That's always fun. Jamie Hayter versus Saraya. And the Young Bucks versus Kyle Fletcher and Will Ospreay. Does anything of this stand out to you?
Okay. So as you're running down the card, what I'm doing right now is looking up who's playing baseball on the 25th next Wednesday. And the Mets are in Atlanta. Interesting. So, I mean, because this is the truth. Yeah. This card doesn't necessarily scream must watch. I was at the first Grand Slam. I was at the second Grand Slam. And personally, I think peak AEW was the seconds before the bell ring at the first Grand Slam, Kenny Omega versus Bryan Danielson. That was history. Everybody knew the history in the making right there.
Right.
It has been a long time since that feeling for AEW in general. It's been a long time since that feeling for Grand Slam. At first, it was, well, what about this show would drive a person to New York? Well, it's in New York. I mean, it's the biggest city in the country. It's hideously accessible to get to. One of the closer destinations for people from Europe if they wanted to make a thing. Okay, cool. For the first time.
Yes.
Now the second time, it has to be based on something more substantive than history, because the history's already been made.
Yeah.
And for this match in particular, and I want to say this is the third or fourth Grand Slam. And I think the gimmick has run its course.
It is the fourth Grand Slam. Fourth.
Yes. Okay. So I think the gimmick has run its course. I think that, and it has run its course, because Grand Slam is going to be next July in England.
I believe so. Yes.
Right. So who knows what they'll do with Ash Stadium next year? Will they have an event there? Personally, I think that this is a pay-per-view level venue. I think that if you want to have something substantive in a unique venue, then you make it the pay-per-view.
Right.
Also, more and just as important is that it's a 4-hour long event.
Oof.
Exactly, because they tape. Well, at first it was a 2-hour Rampage or something like that, and then now the Collision exists. It's going to be a 2-hour Collision afterwards that will be taped at Ash for a broadcast later on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you live in New York or you don't, is this event worth leaving the venue at 11-ish for? Fighting on to get that last 7 train back in Times Square before the overnight schedule starts. That these are the questions. So no, this event on paper doesn't really seem, it's not the attraction that it was.
Right.
And my searing hatred of Jon Moxley aside, there are things that I can like about the match, about the card rather. Bryan Danielson versus Nigel McGuinness. This is a pay-per-view event. I mean, that's the match that's where you have to have that match. Right. Mariah May versus Yuka Sakazaki for the Women's World Championship. I think that's a pay-per-view match. Something that you should have there. And then you have the fallout from the Blackpool Combat Club versus Friends of the Combat Club. Okay. So there's storyline implications and stuff like that too. It's just that it's all kind of meh because it's TV. If it were a pay-per-view,
I see,
and it was only 6 matches, then this would be the equivalent of like a takeover. And I would, it's Bryan versus McGuinness pay-per-view. They're going to have to step it up a bit.
Yes.
We haven't really seen the evil Yuka Sakazaki in America. And those that watch Tokyo Joshi Pro know what that means. Maybe we
can you give us a little insight on that? Because I know most American fans don't know about the evil side of her.
Yes. So she's the magical girl in as a face and cute and Joshi, and she has that same demeanor, much like the Bride of Chucky would, in that she is cute. And Joshi, but she will absolutely take a pair of scissors to your neck and stab until there's no more blood left. She is absolutely devious, methodical in nature. To put it bluntly, she will fuck you up with a smile. And we haven't seen that side in America, and we're not going to see it because she's facing heel Mariah May. With that said, it is kind of a you could kind of deduce what the kind of show that we're going to get based on the Dynamite card. And yeah, sure, the Collision card isn't fully developed yet, and that's probably something that's going to happen this Saturday. Yep. But it's kind of like, I think AEW is in a good enough spot where the Grand Slam era can end peacefully as we move it on to other venues and others, to make it special again. It needs that something, and it ain't the card, and it ain't the building. So I'm okay with it, heading off somewhere else. And then, of course, heading off to London makes it a little bit more interesting again, makes the crowd a little bit more, enthused, because that's one of like 3 shows they're going to get over there all year next year. Whereas in New York, also, they were running shows at UBS. They had a pay-per-view at Prudential Center in Newark. They were having shows, and of course, they had a Grand Slam. The market's kind of tapped already. And so instead of 1 show a year, you're having 4. It's not the same, feeling where it's a must-see attraction event. And for those that care about crowd noise and crowd participation, if they only sold out the first one and they haven't sold out one since, it kind of tells you that if you can't sell out in the biggest city in the country, then it kind of tells you where you are. So the very short answer is meh. I'll peek in between the Mets game and which, thank God, they're not playing at Citi Field that night,
because that would have been a hell of a
gridlock.
Yeah,
Jesus, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But Long Island Railroad is your friend. I'm just saying, if you're trying to get back into the city, pay the $10 and get on the LIRR and head back into Manhattan. But as far as the show goes, yeah, the show is fine. It's an above average Dynamite, and that's what I want something more than that.
So it seems to me with Grand Slam, like we're talking about, that there are some special things on this card, and typically they are, but right. I feel it's becoming the new Battle of the Belts, right? Where remember how Battle of the Belts used to be a big deal? Right. Like, oh, every title is going to be defended, almost like their version of Night of Champions. But then no belts ever changed hands, and the matches themselves were pretty, I don't want to say you could tell, obviously a scripted sport, but you could tell who was winning, who wasn't winning. It's like watching WCW Worldwide back in the day against the Jobber, where you know that the main person is going over. And right. I know Yuka Sakazaki's not beating Mariah May. You know what I mean?
Not for the belt.
It's for the belt, yes.
Yeah, not for the belt though. I'm just saying, like, if it weren't for the belt,
if it was not title, I'd believe it. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe. You know, but and she's also a heel, so maybe she does, a heel thing. Right. But for the belt, no. Stop.
You know, we got Jamie Hayter against Saraya, and no offense to Saraya, just she hasn't been it in AEW this entire time. So it's a nice warm-up match for Jamie Hayter to get back in the swing of things, and the crowd's gonna love her because she was one of the most over superstars before she, went out with injury.
Right.
My own personal taste. I have never been a Young Bucks guy. Going all the way back to PWG, even when I was on other shows back in 2015, 2016, talking about, I don't get it. I still don't care. I don't care what Jordans they're wearing right now. I don't care how producery obnoxiously they want to be. And it's like they're going up against Kyle Fletcher and Will Ospreay. So you're basically telling me Kyle Fletcher's in this match to take the pinfall, because that's all Kyle Fletcher's been doing a lot of recently, is just losing. So it's a pretty mundane card, unless Marina Shafir is just going to jump in and choke out Darby Allin for Moxley, which would be interesting to see. Nothing else really gets my attention unless it's Bryan Danielson versus McGuinness. And also, we do have one match already confirmed for Collision: Hook versus Roderick Strong, with Mike Bennett and everyone's favorite wrestler Matt Taven for the FTW title under FTW rules. And sure.
Wait. Oh, it's Hook versus Strong with his minions.
With his minions. Yeah, no, not like 3-on-1 handicap match. No, his minions at ringside. Every week I'm still surprised Matt Taven has a job. And everyone, I don't get why he works.
Matt Taven is stealing checks, man.
He's been stealing checks, but this time around, like those 4 women who watch, Paywall of Honor, who are Matt Taven fans,
you know who you are.
Kudos to y'all, because I don't see it. But Grand Slam would be more important to me if I lived in New York still, right? I would, and I've been to enough Met games and enough US Open matches out there in Queens to know, like you said, that LIRR is definitely your friend. But it's to me, the correlation, like here in Arlington, moving to Texas or moving to Dallas, if I have to go to a show in Arlington, it's a drag. And we don't have public transportation to get to Arlington. I gotta either A, Uber or Lyft it, or B, rent a car.
And that's $50.
Yeah. So I get people's kind of about going out to an AEW show, because like we said on numerous times on this show, AEW has a specific audience they cater to. Do they travel? That's neither here nor there. I think
this isn't 2019 anymore.
Yes, this isn't the new car smell is off, right? They are what they are at current rate. And if I lived in New York, I don't even know if I still would go. And I used to live in Harlem, so all I would have to do is jump on the M60 and take that all the way, all the way over to I guess where Shea Stadium used to be, and just go from there. But I don't know, guys. I wouldn't. Maybe you guys would, watching at home. Y'all would make that trek.
Well, so that's the thing. Like okay, so we're speaking of a person that would be there in attendance, and realistically, it's a Wednesday night. So that means that I'm not going to make it back to work in time in the morning. So on Thursday. So that's one thing. And then of course it would be me immediately leaving after work and then hauling ass up there on the train or you catching a flight to be there in time. So am I really willing to miss 2 days of work to go up there? Right. I mean, it's not even about the time. It's just about the principle. I could save that rate. I don't want to miss 2 days for one event in the evening in New York. Yeah. So that's one thing. The second thing is I don't want to leave the stadium at midnight because the collision doesn't just happen immediately after Dynamite ends. It's about a 15-minute intermission between the two shows. Khan comes out, does this whole thing, rah rah rah, greatest company ever, and then they start the taping of Collision in real time. So when you have a commercial break, they take you 2 minutes and stuff like that. So that's 2 hours. I don't want to leave there at 11:30. And I'd be damned if I'm more than 7, coming back into Manhattan to catch a bus at 1:30 in the morning to get back home by sunrise. Or I stay up there, which is $200 for a hotel, and now it becomes more of a thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm only speaking to people that can go. Watching the show, it's not must watch. No. It just isn't. I understand. Now, it's not much watch to me. But personally, and I have to add the caveat that I'm not really enamored with any of the major storylines that are happening right now. Do I think that the matches will be good? Well, yeah. But AEW's matches are generally good. But I need something a little bit more that's just good. Because Dynamite is pretty good. And if I want to pop in and watch it, I'll pop in and watch it. But I need just a little bit more than that. Now, I'm looking at Ticketmaster on the other half of my screen, and there are a decent amount of seats available. On the hard cam side, there is nothing available on the lower level. The second level, sure, hard cam. And I don't even think they're using the entirety of the third level.
Oh, wow.
Right. There's a smattering of seats on the 100 level. There are no floor seats left. There's a smattering of seats on the 100th level. So if you're looking at the camera, that's going to be pretty full. Second level and third level, meh. Third level, definitely. So I think I could sneak in there with a decent third level seat for $25. Section 304, right in the corner, $25. I could sneak in there for that. It's a lot more trouble than it's worth for, a C+ show. Or C+ card, rather.
Right.
Now, and AEW does this often. They know they have something good up their sleeve. They don't tease it. The magic happens, and then they go, hey, you should have watched. Well, advertise the show.
There you go. And we'll talk about the TV deal shortly, but in the chat, we got, so the main of wrestling is superb, but because there's no effing friendship bracket, you call it not must-see TV. You must see a effing doctor and get a reality check. Don't know about any friendships in wrestling or anything to do with it. It just doesn't appeal to me, the card itself. And I can speak for Crab when he says it's meh. And that's fine if you think it's an awesome show and that AEW is an awesome company, and that's great. They put on good matches and what have you. Generally they do. What we're saying is this is not 2019 anymore.
It's lost its luster.
It's lost the luster. And that's okay for us to make that assertion as fans. And that's okay for people who were like gun-ho about AEW. If you still love it, that's great. But for me, as a wrestling fan, to Crab's point, I'm not making that troop all the way up to Queens, bracing for all that, just to come back on a crowded 7-train shoot. That's part of the reason I never went to Met games after a while, because I didn't want to have to deal with come back on the 7-train, especially if it went after innings, especially if it went extra innings. Yeah. So that's fair. If you think that we need to see a doctor because we don't like AEW, you're entitled to your opinion. But just us personally, it's not worth the show.
With that said, though, I think that Grand Slam as an event should be a pay-per-view.
Yes, it should have been to start
because right now they're kind of playing both sides of the fence. where this is an above average Dynamite. But I think that on paper, if this were a pay-per-view, this wouldn't be a terrible card.
Right.
But because it's TV and you can kind of deduce the way the things are going to go, the only 50-50 match in there is Danielson versus McGuinness. It's a regular singles match. It's not for any title or anything like that. There's no stipulations involved. It's just a dream match. Okay, cool. But everything else is pretty much, you have a pretty good idea where it's going to go. And for me, that's not particularly inciting, because if I want to just see random wrestling, the indies are there, or I can just watch popping on NXT or do a bunch of different things. But because this is Grand Slam, this is supposed to be one of the big ones. They kind of need to go, dare I say, all in on Grand Slam. But they gotta step it up and just go all in with the pay-per-view format, or just have Dynamite at UBS. But
how many people does UBS seat off top of your head?
16,000.
Okay.
Yeah, but they're not. It's a misnomer. If Grand Slam feels like a misnomer with this card, and that's all I'm saying.
Right, and that's what I can attest to that too. I've been peeking at AEW the last couple of weeks, and I've said on the show that I felt like the product was declining. It just isn't as enticing to me. Again, I will say, to me, it is not as enticing as it once was, because years ago when I got involved with watching independent wrestling, 90% of those people are now signed by one of the three major promotions. So I've seen these guys and gals already. I've seen them numerous. I have seen multiple MJF matches way back when he was back in Long Island, at like the bootleg Elks Lodge, also in Queens, New York. Shout out to Elks Lodge. I've seen Soraya when she was Paige. You know what I mean? I've seen a good chunk of these performers, and it's been almost a decade, for me watching independent wrestling till now. So I'm sorry, it's just not going to beat down my door to say, yeah, let me go watch this AEW. And I think that's another issue that I'm kind of wrestling with, to pardon the pun. Where's the new talent? Where's the young built-up talent that everyone keeps saying that we're going to have at AEW, but we keep going back to people like the Bucks, and now we're relying on, Danielson. Where's Swerve in this? You know what I mean? Where's Adam Page in this?
Okay, well, to be fair, as far as the young talent that AEW is stifling and stuff like that, it's not that they're young specifically, other than like Nick Wayne, who's like 14. It's maybe undiscovered. This is a new audience for people. This is maybe some of the largest audiences that a lot of these, that most of these guys are performing in front of. People like Willow, who should be a megastar. Like, just full stop. I love Willow, but she's never been the All In has got to be the largest crowd she's ever been in front of. So it's there are a couple of examples of the ability to take something and run with it. I do think that Luchasaurus, for example, not a young guy by any stretch, but definitely not a household name from other wrestling scenes on a mainstream scenario. I will give Jack Berry credit. Really kind of reinvented himself, doing the whole scapegoat thing, turned a nothing burger into something, and then ran with that. So cool. Same thing, Nick Wayne, Christian, doing the best work he's done in many years with the whole patriarchy deal. Even though it is still led by Christian, I like the fact that Nick Wayne is doing a thing. I like that Luchasaurus has something to do. And then, of course, you do have your swerves, and Adam Page is a little bit older. So it's not just all elite friends, as it was way back when, because they had to establish something with guys that were already there. There are some names that are being built into household names, or names that you may have known already, that are building themselves into AEW mainstays. Unfortunately, the squeakiest wheel would be Monet or Saraya or Jericho or the Bucks. And that's a shame to not give the people that really deserve it that shine as well. So it's a mixed bag, but unfortunately, everybody only wants to talk about the people they already hate.
Right. And I went back and I just looked right now to see what the card was last year for the event. So we had Eddie Kingston and Claudio Castagnoli. Chris Jericho defeats Sammy Guevara last year. Ray Phoenix beats Jon Moxley. Saraya defeats Tony Storm, and MJF beats Samoa Joe by technical submission. So already I'm looking at last year's card. I'm thinking, wow, that's a better card than we got this year, right? So something's missing. Let's go back to 2022. Hold on. Let me try this. Let me go back to this.
I mean,
Chris Jericho versus Claudio.
Need Jericho versus Sammy?
We don't need Jericho, period. But that's neither here nor there. Jericho versus Claudio. We had the Acclaimed defeating Swerve in Our Glory. Pac beating Orange Cassidy. Tony Storm beating Serena Deeb, Athena, and Dr. Britt Baker in a fatal four-way for the interim Women's World Championship, which I might have to go back and rewatch that match. That seems interesting. And your favorite wrestler, Jon Moxley versus Bryan Danielson. So again, 2022, pretty good card by all intents and purposes. And just for shiggles, first year. Okay. Dark Order defeats Jobbers. Let's just say that. Kenny Omega and Bryan Danielson ended in a time limit draw, which was a great match if I remember correctly. Yep. MJF defeated Pillman Jr. when he was getting that random push a couple years back. Malachi Black defeating Cody Rhodes in 11 minutes. That's actually, wow, faster than I thought it would be. Sting and Darby beating FTR. And Dr. Baker, who's a dentist, in case you didn't know, beat Ruby Soho by submission. But Rampage had CM Punk beating Powerhouse Hobbs. That's interesting that we had that on a random episode of Rampage. Right. And then Moxley and Eddie Kingston beat Suzuki Gun of Minoru Suzuki, Lance Archer. And there were a couple other matches, but those are the ones that stand out to me. So you're right. This actually might have to be, at least to me, maybe that's another reason why they're moving it out of America and moving it to overseas to kind of stimulate it next year, because maybe even AEW knows we got to change something here. Because I just went through all the cards from the previous years. This one still is light comparatively. So I don't know, folks. Y'all might think we're crazy. Y'all might think we need to see a doctor. But those are our thoughts on Grand Slam. And I want AEW to succeed. I want everyone at home to know that. I want AEW to have the best matches and put on quality storylines and things of that nature. But they haven't been doing it recently. And I don't know how to defend it other than it's getting boring. But that's my opinion. Crab, real quick, do you think it's getting boring?
Well, okay. I'm a little bit biased, because long and short of it is that I never really liked anybody at the top of the card. Mm-hmm. So Jericho was champion and Page is champion. I don't care about Kenny Omega. I hate Jon Moxley. The thing that I liked about AEW the most was when they were doing their indie recruiting back in the heyday of Dark and Elevation. It was to see who would get a chance. Yeah. So I never personally watched AEW for the storylines. And I know that that's contradictory of what I've said 10 minutes ago about these stories are boring. But if you're not going to give me an interesting matchup with people that I want to see, then I need something else to attach to. And that would be, the story. Well, why are we here? So for that, they've gone into a more by the numbers. This is a TV match. It's going to be built and reenacted the same way. And then we're going to go to commercial break. You're going to have your heel, get the grain offense, and then he's going to lose it. And then, the finish is the finish. That's all well and good. But then also they have a lot of people that I'm interested in, not on TV. Hobbs is hurt. We don't know what's going on with Ricky Starks. We don't know what's going on with the Lucha Brothers. Will they? Hero. He can go. But Miro never really panned out. There's a handful of women that we're just starting to see come back. Dr. Baker and Hayter just came back. What will Adam Cole be when he comes back? So, and there's still some big names on the shelf too. So, they're definitely not putting out their best product, but they're also not working with the best hand. And then also Jade left, Cody left. QT is only in the back, and QT Marshall is one of my favorite wrestlers. God damn it. And so that's a thing also. The Dark Order is kind of fizzled out. What are they doing now? So a lot of the things that from the 2019, 2020, 21 aren't really a thing anymore. The Hardys are gone, and so on and so forth. So it's for me specifically, the interest has waned a bit because of the fact that I'm not seeing who I want to see on TV.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail right on the head. It's like I said earlier, my version of indie wrestling has now become AEW and WWE and Impact or TNA. And I'm over here like, all right, now what? It's almost like you keep going to see the same movie over and over again, but you're expecting a different result.
Fast and the Furious 11 next year. Can't wait.
Oh, yeah. Now we're going to go from space to multiverse theory, probably.
That's right.
But I think we just hit the halfway point of tonight's show, guys. Stay tuned. We got some indie spotlight coming up. We have a conversation about the new TV deal again that AEW is apparently going to solidify with WB, and something about a Sphere in Las Vegas putting on shows, and potentially could that work with a wrestling event? But find out more later here on the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast. We'll be right back after this. A little birdie told me, everybody, that you may be interested in doing some sponsorship and advertising opportunities with us here at Big Gold Belt Media. You know what? You might as well, because we are the golden standard for all of your media needs. Why would you want to go anywhere else? Besides, all of your pre-roll ads, your mid-roll ads, as well as your on-air reads are going to be done by me, Damian G. Yeah, professional broadcaster, Damian G. We do all types of social media promotions. That means your podcast, your IG, your Facebook, your Twitter, and your business website all get shouted out on our network here at Big Gold Belt Media, where we cover wrestling, movies, comics, and more. And you can find out more information and make those inquiries, kids, because, limited time offer here at Big Gold Belt Group at gmail.com. Again, that is Big Gold Belt Group at gmail.com. Why would you want to go anywhere else? I wouldn't. Well, I work here, but I still wouldn't even if I didn't. So again, Big Gold Belt Media for all your sponsorship and advertising opportunities, your podcast, your IG, your Facebook, your Twitter, all of your social media platforms, as well as any business website you want us to promote on our show. Big Gold Belt Group at gmail.com, and let them know Damon G sent you. And that would be me, Damian G. Welcome back to the show. And as we see Miss Makiba saying, book your spot. Yeah, book your spot. If you have anything you want to promote, let us know here. Reach out to us at Big Gold Belt on social media. So typically we have, after the break, our indie spotlight. So I'm going to send it over to Jamal to lead us into indie wrestling.
Yep. So this week we are going up to Long Island, New York, Belmore specifically. JFK High School on Belmore Avenue in South Shore of Long Island, New York. October 6th, 4 p.m. The door is open, 5 p.m. the bell time. You're going to want to be at JFK High School for Create a Pro Wrestling. Speaking of Willow and MJF and all of them, because half of Long Island works in AEW now. But it's Create a Pro Wrestling, Base Brawl. It's the fundraiser, wrestling show supporting the MBLL local youth baseball organization in the Long Island area. You have Dirty Dango. Yeah, you may remember him from WWE. Tommy Dreamer, who definitely works at the White Castle up the street. And Brian Myers, who's a Creator Pro, long-standing member. And then one of my favorite New York Mets, Turk Wendell, is going to be in the building. I know, right? He's going to be in the building. I have no idea how they pull Turk. But it's Base Brawl, a fundraiser supporting youth sports in Long Island. It is October the 6th, a Sunday. Bell time is at 5 p.m. Doors open at 4. That's at JFK High School in Belmore, New York. 3000 Belmore Avenue, about a mile from the Long Island Railroad Station. So head out there, see some good indie wrestling from Creator Pro, and that's the indie spotlight for this week.
Get out there and support your local indies, everybody. When I lived in New York, I pretty much lived on the independent wrestling. I fell in love with it back in 2015, 2016. And that was before I joined the show. And it was one of those things where you kind of got to expand your palette. I was one of those WWE, WCW diehards. And once I started to watch independent wrestling, it changed my viewpoint on the wrestling business as a whole. So do yourself a favor, check out your local indies. You never know who's going to show up. I remember distinctly, we have Metroplex Wrestling here, MPX, which is a wrestling school, but on random days, they'll have a superstar come in. And we had Ethan Page once, like randomly, on a random Saturday night at this wrestling school, and it was a great show. So go out, support your local indies, get some merch, all that good stuff. But I want to switch gears, even though we're going to still talk about AEW. This impending business deal between Warner Brothers Discovery and AEW. I feel as if we've been talking about it ad nauseum, but the long and short of it, it seems like it's already done. So we're looking at 3 years guaranteed, plus a 4th-year option, an annual deal in the range of $170 million annually, which before the show, let me let y'all in on a secret, I damn near spit out my water, but then Crab talked me off the ledge talking about all the money that's being thrown around for sports and other things.
He was going to jump.
Yep. Programming will air on TNT, TBS, and True TV twice weekly. True TV was interesting for me. It's like, oh, I forgot that channel actually exists. So knowing that, Jamal, hearing about that, what does that say about the future of AEW, which is a little bit more solidified? Do you think anything changes? And B, is Tony Khan shrewd in terms of business for this? Do you think this is a great deal for them or not?
Well, how about you say it? You said it was a 5-year deal?
3 years with a option for a 4th.
Okay. So 3 years, $170 million, which turns out to be $520 million, something like that, right? So I think I would say that's kind of low.
Yeah.
But to be fair, we don't really know what the distribution looks like. There's, of course, been rumors of AEW Shockwave existing as a show. Not entirely sure how that fits into the frame. Is that just for the US? Is that a worldwide distribution rights on TNT and Warner Brothers Media? There's a lot to be uncovered in this. To say if that $170 million a year for 4 years is worth it.
Right.
Also, it kind of makes you wonder, is that the best they can do, considering how much money that Warner Brothers is hemorrhaging and that they lost the NBA?
Yes.
Who has the bargaining chip here? AEW for Warner Brothers is cheap to produce. It really is just a distribution deal. All they got to do is press the button and it goes to HBO Max and around the world. Cool. But does that make AEW more attractive and more valuable, knowing that they don't have to put so much skin in the game to produce the show, versus the NBA, which that means that they have to negotiate with all of the other networks. They have to negotiate with the NBA itself for collective bargaining and the revenue sharing from the TV deal. And with wrestling, it's a little bit simpler. So I guess the question is, once this thing is actually finalized and the official word comes out, and we'll revisit this to put a bow on it, who won the deal? And as of right now, without knowing what the streaming implications are, will this thing show up on Hulu the next day? Will it show up on HBO Max or something like that the next day? It's really hard to say because it's easy to say that it's $170 million a year, but then what is AEW's operating cost? Are they going to make money off of this deal? Because if they do add a new show, will they split the roster into 2 or 3 and run an A, B, and C group? Because I can't imagine them keeping Rampage and Dynamite and then having Collision and Shockwave and then doing Ring of Honor. Something's probably going to go. Will it be Rampage? Probably should. But that's of course assuming that Shockwave will actually come into existence. That could just be an internet-only thing that they film in their downtime, similar to Dark and Elevation. Maybe Shockwave is just something exclusively for HBO Max. We really don't know where everything will fall. So it's kind of hard to say right now if this is the good deal. And also more importantly, and this is a question for you guys out there. Do you really care? I mean, if it becomes harder to consume AEW, or actually, if it becomes easier or harder to consume AEW, isn't that the most important thing about this contract? I mean, can I watch AEW uninterrupted, unimpeded by other sports? Because are we still going to have the same issues? Yeah. Will March Madness kick AEW off of TBS? Don't know. Will the baseball playoffs kick AEW off of TNT? We don't know. What will the hockey playoffs look like in April, wherever that lands? True TV is going to have more sports. I mean, that was the big thing about the NBA on TNT, is that they kept scoring with Dynamite when they moved it to TBS. And then something else happened, and they moved it again, or they had Collision on Friday night, or they made Rampage live, or whatever. Can they avoid these things with a new deal? Do they have precedent over events to be booked and the ability to be bumped or not bumped? So I don't know. We got to just really wait and see, and hopefully sooner than later, hopefully a Grand Slam, because big time event. It's not a pay-per-view, but it's definitely an elevated Dynamite. It's not the pay-per-view, which is going to be in October. Hopefully a Grand Slam, they actually announce a thing, and because it's next week, everybody's saying that the deal is done. Grand Slam would be a perfect place to announce whatever this thing is.
I am worried about this thing blowing up in all the worst ways. And I'll say this. If they do have 4 shows, right? Let's say they bring in Shockwave, or Shockmaster, Shockwave, what have you. I don't want this to become so watered down now, where production costs, like you were saying, production costs are a thing. Paying the talent is a thing. Just regular costs. To put a C- show product out where it becomes WCW Thunder. And if y'all remember back in those days, kids, the WCW Thunder days, we had maybe the first 3 weeks of Thunder were great, and then it became a C- D+ show. And
let me ask you this, though, because personally, I think that Thunder was always punching up, whereas WCW Worldwide was not. They both had the same kind of product as far as, and they stepped up production with Thunder and stuff like that. Okay, fine. But it definitely was the inferior show. But so was Worldwide. Nobody confused the two. And yet it was, but you knew what you were getting. With Thunder, you thought that you were getting 2 extra hours of Nitro. You were not. And with Worldwide, you were getting an hour of wrestling where you really didn't expect it. I think for me, that's what Dark was.
Yes.
And so do you think that this, because, they already have another 2-hour show, and that's Collision. And they're already kind of in the same vein of Nitro and Thunder. You have the A show and the B show. But do you think that they need any more content? I mean, is 6 hours enough, including the Paywall of Honor?
I think that's when it gets tricky with the Paywall of Honor, because you mentioned earlier there's something get the axe. I personally think Ring of Honor should get the axe.
Wow.
It's just, I would have to look at obviously the profit loss statement, but I haven't heard any major things about Ring of Honor, or as we say, Paywall of Honor. And it's been how long now? So if anything's on the chopping block, it's not Collision. And if they're bringing on a new show, I was going to call it Thunder, but Shockwave, then Paywall of Honor, you might as well just take everybody that's on a Ring of Honor contract and put them on Shockwave, unless you want to call it Ring of Honor Shockwave. And then that's a different story. But at the same token, there's too much saturation I worry about, and we talk about this with WWE programming also, like how much is too much. The 2 hours of SmackDown, the 3 hours of Raw, which will now be 2 hours, rather shortly, and then NXT. I don't personally think anyone needs 5 hours of wrestling, because there's other things to potentially do and watch. But for AEW, I'm really curious if with this new deal that they have to churn out more content to justify this deal. And if they have to churn out more content, given that's, and I'll say only 170 million a year, who's getting the bang for the buck here? I feel like this is two ships that were kind of taking on water, saving each other to bail out the water together. But is it really going to lead to long-term success?
Well, to be fair, Warner Brothers is the bigger ship. And the thing that we have been screaming about over the past 2 or 3 years is synergy. You have all of these different avenues of streaming and content, and we don't really see it as much as we should. Now, WWE has done a damn good job of connecting with many different people across many different avenues and across many different revenue streams in order to get many different eyes on the product. Yeah. AEW could do that better. Yes, sending the wrestlers in on the day of the show to do morning radio is one thing, and that's great. But why aren't we seeing the kids version of this show air on Cartoon Network? Or why aren't we seeing the horror version of the show air on another thing? I mean, there's just so many different ways to why isn't Kenny Omega in a Mortal Kombat game? There are many different avenues, and that's what we wanted for the longest time. But now that the NBA is gone, hockey is a thing, but it doesn't really hold the same weight as the NBA. And also, it's a regional sport. So, and baseball, they only really have the playoffs on TNT. So between now and March, when March Madness comes through, AEW is kind of the crown jewel of the TNT Sports umbrella. What will either side do with that? And that's going to be the most interesting thing going into the winter, is seeing what this new partnership, well, it's not necessarily new, but what this partnership continues to be. Because honestly, if you're AEW, you gotta want more. Yeah, you gotta want more. And of course, if you're the Warners, you want consistency, good, cheap, consistent product. And I don't think 500,000, 600,000, 800,000 eyes looking at your product on any given Wednesday or Friday night. That's exactly what TNT wants, or the Warners want. So I think that this is a situation that can work, but I also think that HBO Max is pivotal to the deal. I think the ability to have AEW in your back pocket, on your phone, on your tablet, live anywhere in the country, that's what it is nowadays. That's really what it is. So I think that's a thing that really should happen, and maybe as a part of the deal, maybe it will. So who knows? And of course, that will be interesting. I think I said it last week. Raw is leaving television, which means that Raw will not be on cable television, traditional television, on Monday nights. Nope. Because not everybody has Netflix. Not everybody's willing to pay for it, especially after they're going up. Could AEW make a play to put content in that slot? 8 to 10 on Mondays. I'm not saying you move Dynamite, but I am saying that this could be very interesting for the exposure of AEW. Right. So, and then of course, if you put it to Monday night, then what does that do for your storytelling, from a storytelling perspective? Because you have the pay-per-view on the weekend. Dynamite's not the A show anymore because you got to get through a B show on Monday to get to Dynamite. Well, obviously, storytelling, linear storytelling is going to change. Yeah. So it's a thing, and it could be very interesting because the only thing that's going to be, because SmackDown is moving back to cable. Okay, cool. We don't know what NXT is going to look like. Okay, cool. If you have the CW in your town, but okay, cool. But the point is that this could be a moment for AEW to capitalize on, and that's also a thing too. We don't even know if there's any incentives. Like maybe if they hit a certain mark, they get more money. Maybe whatever. I don't know.
There's kickers involved, right?
Yeah, the contract could be sliced up a billion different ways, and 4 years with $170 million is the thing that people are stuck on. But I would assume that they're incentivized to do better than that. least I would hope so.
As would I. But you brought up an interesting point about, Mondays losing wrestling. For the last 30 some odd years, it feels like, I believe it is, we've
94?
had some form of wrestling on a Monday night. So the thought of moving potentially, I know we talked about, the A shows on a Wednesday. Why don't we just move the A show on a Wednesday, move it to Monday, and then we still have some sort of wrestling on Monday nights, and that could potentially bring more people to your product because we're still going to have wrestling on Monday nights.
I mean, in theory, you could do Dynamite, Shockwave, Collision, Monday, Wednesday, Saturday.
Yeah, and it would work. I at least for me, I think we'd be dropping the ball if we don't have wrestling on a Monday. So I feel as if now that deal has been signed, and there's a little bit of 3 years is a little bit of, like certainty, right? So you can take more chances because you got this 3-year contract. So the thought of moving Dynamite to Mondays intrigues me because we're talking about something that's been around, like we said, for 30 some odd years. And it's a tradition, even though it's not WWE.
It's a cultural mainstay.
Yes, it's a cultural mainstay for wrestling to be on Monday. So that would be a great idea. But I don't know if AEW wants to uproot the apple cart that's been working for the last couple of years. But I think, honestly, if you could take some chances, this will be the time, moving it from Dynamite from Wednesdays to Monday. Because imagine someone doesn't know about WWE leaving USA and going to Netflix, and they're like, oh, there's wrestling on Monday nights. And then you just tune in to this new show that you've never seen, which is Dynamite if you move it to Mondays. Because let's be honest here, they're not pigeonholed into Wednesdays because we said before, they've been moved around for sports accommodations, right? So,
and they're still like amongst the top 5 shows on cable on Wednesday. So that's, so as much as we spent the first half of the show bashing AEW, you have to acknowledge the fact that they are still getting those sweet ratings that Warner Brothers needs from them. But let me ask you this though: do you think 3 years is too short? Of what do you think that says about the level of commitment that Warner Brothers has with AEW? 3 years with an option for a fourth?
I think for the current content that we're getting from AEW, I think this was for them. They had to take it. If this was WB saying, "Hey, we're only gonna give you 3 years because lately y'all been kind of slack," let's just say that. I'm not saying wrestling
from a wrestling, X's and O's bat wrestling perspective, you could argue that. But the ratings don't reflect that, as they have been in the top 10, barring major history-making news events or the Olympics or something like that. The ratings have been consistently, high. The number will fluctuate, but the percentage is consistently high, and that's what's important. Yeah. So it's not like AEW wouldn't be coming out to the Warner Brothers saying, "Hey, now we actually do have something to chirp about," because we've been in the top 5 consistently of ratings all year long. Number 1 in a few spaces here and there. Pay us. But then 3 years, that doesn't seem like a great commitment because realistically, we're already talking about events into 2025. I mean, July 2025 is not a year away. That's 9 months. We gotta, we're already moving, and by that time, we are 9 months into the current contract, 2.5 years left on it. So that time will go pretty quickly. And it seems that Warner Brothers, I don't know if they are in a position to offer more considering their financial state as well.
And that goes back to what I was saying. I believe it's 2 ships in the night that found each other, and they're just going to try to help each other out. But to your point, I agree with you. And I don't want to drone on a little bit any longer on this, but 3 years is a short time. Most media deals with sports, like let's say the NHL, NBA, MLB, NFL, you don't get 3 years. You usually get a decade. So it's pretty interesting that, well, okay, Tony, you got 3 years. So like you said, they're doing something right in terms of the ratings, but it's almost like, what else are you going to do? Give us something else in these 3 years. I want to see some improvement. Maybe they want to see consistently 1 million per show now, 1.5. And that's the enticement of only giving it a 3-year contract. But let us know in the comments down below. Let us know in the replay or on live whether or not you think this is a good media deal for which side. Personally, I know it's too soon to tell, but I think honestly with that 3-year window, WB was like, I got you right where I want you. But that's just me. Before we get out of here, UFC 306 did something, and we don't typically talk about UFC, and we're not, but we're going to say they had a spectacle this past weekend. And I think that's the best way to say that. They held their event, at the Sphere in Las Vegas. And the way you described the Sphere to me, can you describe to the audience what the Sphere is and why this was a big deal?
So the Sphere is a theater. It is a multi-use venue that can house, I think U2 was the first event there. It is in Vegas, and it can house, it could house musical concerts and theater and stuff like that. And apparently the UFC as well. The kicker about the Sphere is that it's a giant dome. If you've seen the Truman Show, it feels like it's that big, it's just a giant dome. But the real star and attraction of the Sphere is the giant, LED scoreboard, video board on it. So if it's like 3 tiers of seats in the back, and a 200-foot tall and 300-foot wide scoreboard, LED board that has like an 18K image that it can display. So it's the biggest TV you've ever seen, and creates, not to sound like a press release, but a one-of-a-kind immersive experience that we've seen that very few are trying to replicate. It's the damnedest thing you've ever seen. And if you've seen any of the images of UFC 306, which was at the Sphere, because it's a video board behind them, they can display any image they want in 18K resolution. And because the event was a Mexican themed event for Mexican Independence Day, which was the 16th, that's why I'm wearing this hat, Viva Mexico, it's kind of like, it's a different level of immersion that nobody else can reproduce. The only things that they don't have are like lighting effects and smells and sounds like the 4D experience at your theme park or movie theater. But the screen itself is the attraction. As far as looking at it, because it is a dome, the Sphere, it kind of reminds me of like the Omnimax theater or the Planetarium IMAX, where you have a 240-degree field of vision around you, and you're looking up and you're seeing your entire field of vision covered by the stars or the sky or whatever, or a plane or whatever you're watching. And in the Sphere, you have to create specialized content for it, for the oversized screen, which is part of the allure as well. So obviously the big question is, if UFC can do a thing there, and granted, the Octagon looks really weird in front of this giant video board, when is WWE going to bring a wrestling event there?
I actually thought I would think that AEW would have tried it first, because it's the new shiny toy. But you're right. WWE is going to inevitably try something there, because obviously the TKO connection.
Sure.
Can wrestling work at the Sphere? So the Octagon was real tiny when we looked at the set photos. Right. Sometimes I think a venue is a little too big for its britches, and I think with a WWE style ring, I can see them having a WrestleMania there, because it's magical. It's one of those, or even SummerSlam. But I don't know if it works long term. Maybe as a one shot, because I think that's what UFC was going for it as a one shot to see how it was. And $20 million they put into it to make it a spectacle. Right. But now, like, again, the TKO connection, before we get out of here, do you think WWE can pull this off?
Well, it really is just going to come down to the money that they want to spend on it, because realistically, it is going to be a hell of a thing to produce, because you have to physically go out there and create the content to incorporate the video screen. And because that content is at such a high resolution, the production values have to be astronomical to produce anything for it. Now, granted, WWE has their AR graphics, and they have like the new Sony cameras that can get the high resolution slow motion shots and stuff like that they use in the sidelines, and they have LED boards everywhere. Hell, the LED boards for the replace the Titantron a few years ago and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw what happened during COVID, where they brought fans via video into the stands. So it's not that they're not willing to spend money on high value production. I just don't think the venue is big enough to justify the expense because of the fact that I think it only seats, a couple thousand. This isn't a 20,000 seat venue, maybe 5. So, yeah, it seems cool in theory. It would be interesting to use this giant, and I mean giant screen, to your effect. But it is, at the end of the day, the wrestling happens in the ring.
Yeah. And
after a certain point, you're still looking from wherever you're sitting and trying to find the ring in the middle of it all. And looking at
this.
Right.
Where is it?
Right. And that's kind of a thing too. I'm not saying that you shouldn't go to WrestleMania. But I am going to say that if you go to a wrestling event in a football stadium, either bring some binoculars or prepare to watch it on TV. Because you're really just going to say that you were there. Because you're not going to, unless you spent the money on great tickets, you're just going for the experience of saying that you were there.
Yeah.
I think that this wrestling in the sphere would be a similar thing. Definitely a pay-per-view, event, but I'm not entirely sure that WWE would sink the money into it to make it what it really needs to be. Because if you're going to do it, it's got to be, a B+ level pay-per-view. And then, of course, that's just for the ring. We don't know where commentary would be or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I don't see them having any type of cage matches or anything like that too. And the insurance of the building wouldn't let them have a ladder match or anything like that too. So it would be interesting to see what type of a wrestling show could happen there.
I'm going to think outside the box really quick and say back in the day, WrestleMania used to be broadcast on, was it closed circuit TV?
Yep.
Different locations. So
yeah,
if you,
what was that, 3 or 4? That was
three different locations
yeah.
for WrestleMania, and you saw it via closed circuit TV. I'm thinking that wouldn't be a bad experience if you're watching it like a closed circuit TV, like you're watching WrestleMania. It's not at the Sphere, but you can watch it at the Sphere and have it be this immersive, like you said, panoramic experience at 18K, which, to be fair, I didn't know we had 18K, so that just shows how behind the times I am. I think you could pull that off. But like you said, WrestleMania is one thing, and I can speak from experience going to WrestleMania here in Dallas, or in Arlington, I should say, in DFW. Where I was sitting was decent seats, but I had to watch the video board more than I wish I had to, but I can say I was there. So I think, to Crab's point about it's going to be more of well, at least I was there, as an event. But if you use it as a closed circuit event where you want to broadcast, let's say a WWE show, or like I said, SummerSlam or WrestleMania, in that immersive experience, I think that would be a good ticket to pay for. For me, if you can't make it to WrestleMania, I feel like that would be the next best thing, is to be able to do that.
Oh yeah, definitely. It would be interesting to see, well, if they could overcome the production issues that they would need to do, because again, I can't stress how big the goddamn screen is. Right. So if you have a 4K television, this is 4 times more resolution than that. Also, the wrestling is only broadcast in 1080p, which is 4 times less resolution than 4K. So, no, I just don't. I don't see it happening, considering because wrestling is a 360 experience, and and they already broadcast in movie theaters and stuff like that too. So I can't wait for SummerSlam in Minneapolis at the football stadium, largely because I like the stadium, I like the city. I, not particularly sold on the matches, but I do want to say that I was there for at least one night. And if they had the thing at the Sphere, I would make every effort to be there too, so that I could say that I was there. Mm-hmm. As far as the, having the show there, logistically, you're just going for the experience.
I think that's the thing for me. Just logistically, it would just be too cumbersome to try to make that work. So the next best thing, like I said, is to just treat it as an experience for a closed circuit. If you want to broadcast it into the Sphere, and for those who can't make it live, it'll be a great experience for everybody. But let us know down below in the comments before we get out of here. Would you go to a WWE or AEW event at the Sphere? And if so, how much would you pay? I wouldn't be paying too much out of dollar, because I believe somebody paid $67,000 to go to the UFC.
But the event was in the Sphere. You're saying that, like, would you go to an event that's broadcast at the Sphere? No, that's not a $70,000 tab. But
No.
would you go to an event, a B-level, B-plus pay-per-view? Would you go to, well, it could be Money in the Bank, but would you go to Grand Slam at the Sphere?
Is it at the Sphere, the actual
It's
ring?
at the Sphere, it's in the building.
Just to say I went?
Yeah, basically.
Just to say I went.
Because WrestleMania is going to be down the street at Allegiant.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just to say that you went.
Yeah, and that's all. But we just thought it was interesting to talk about. I'm just picturing, like you said, the Titantron is a thing of the past pretty much, and now the next phase of how are we going to get our wrestling fix? The Sphere.
Yeah.
But
I'm down.
Yeah, I'm down to go say, like I said, I was there, but I wouldn't make it a habit. Maybe that was a one-off like UFC did with 306. But that wraps it up here, folks, here at the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast, biggoldbelt.com, your one-stop shop for all things entertainment. We got, obviously, wrestling. We have movies, TV show reviews, things of that nature, and more. Cheap plug, go catch me, Damien G, over there. I did a review for Transformers 1, and I'm going to just hit you with a little taste and saying, find out why I sense the best Transformers movie of all time.
God damn it. Okay.
Yeah.
I was hoping that you weren't going to say that.
I did say that. And I can tell you I was a skeptic. The boss man knew I was a skeptic when I saw the first trailer. But best Transformers movie I ever seen. But go over and check that out. BigGoldBelt.com on YouTube. You can find us streaming on X, on Twitch, and on YouTube. And then the replay will be up within 24 hours. We'll catch you next time on the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast. And thanks for joining. 7 Central, 8 Eastern. And remember, kids, just because you have an arena doesn't mean you need to play things at this arena like a B-level pay-per-view or a TV show. We'll catch you next week.
All I really need, that